Hello and welcome. My name is Jenny Ramone, and I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's event in the Formation series, co-delivered by the Postcolonial Studies Centre at Nottingham Trent University and Bonington Gallery. This afternoon, we're holding our event slightly earlier than usual, and this is because we're very lucky to be hosting a poet from Pakistan, Annum Salman, who'll be in conversation and delivering a reading of her poetry in today's event, titled Annum Salman Sends Me, Remembering Incomplete Identities of the Past. This event is part of the third segment of Formations, which focuses on memorials, statues, and on identity and memory. In this evening's event, Annum will be joining us live from Pakistan to read from her collection, Sense Me, and to discuss identity and her relationship with the UK and Pakistan. She'll be introduced by and in conversation with Ramisha Rafique, a postgraduate research student at Nottingham Trent University. Ramisha is also a poet and a writer, and she hosts regular online poetry and literary events and conversations through her Instagram page. To turn to the practicalities then, in a moment I'll hand over to Ramisha, who will introduce Annum Salman and will host the poetry reading and then the conversation. At the end of the discussion, I'll have time to pose 2 or 3 audience questions live online. So if you'd like me to ask your question, please send it to me by email using the email address that you'll be able to see at the bottom of the screen, formations@ntu.ac.uk. You can also send comments via the YouTube chat, and I'll try to ask any questions that you pose there too. We expect the event to last around an hour in total. So thank you very much for joining us, and I'm delighted now to invite Ramisha Rafique to introduce her guest, Annum Salman, for an hour of poetry and discussion.
Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you, Jenny, for a very warm welcome. Tonight I'm very proud to introduce Annum Salman to you all, who'll be reading from her collection, Sense Me, and we'll have a little conversation afterwards, which I'm looking forward to very much. So if you'd all like to join me in welcoming Annum Salman.
Thank you, Ramisha. I am really, really happy to be here. I think it's really fascinating that, I left a country that I made home and I can still connect with people who are residing there. So I'm extremely excited to be here, and this is what I love doing. So, I'm currently in a corporate job, and this is what drives me. This is what I live for. So it's super necessary for me to do these things to be able to function normally. So I'm really, really happy to be here, and thank you so much for making me a part of this. And thanks to Bonington Gallery as well and Nottingham Trent University. Yeah. So should I start with the poetry? Okay, great. So I'm just going to start with introducing my book to all of you. I am a spoken word poet, and I published my book. It's called Sense Me, and I published it in the UK in January 2019. The reason why this entire session really relates to me is because all of Sense Me is actually about identity itself. And a lot of people ask me why my book cover looks like this. It has a gun and a heart, and it basically has to do with identity. It's a lot about what people perceive you as. So I think identity is a lot more than just your physical appearance and what you wear, what you, the kind of hair you have, the kind of body you have, right? It goes further than that. It's also about your culture. It's also about your language. It's also about how you see yourself and how others see you. So I think it's a combination of both. And the title of my entire poetry is called Sense Me because it basically encompasses that entire feeling. And, what you see, what you hear, what you talk, the way you feel things around you, I think that all form who you are by the end and what kind of a person you end up becoming and how you see the world and how this world ends up seeing you. So coming back to the book cover, you see a gun and a heart, and the reason that I went for that and why I relate that to identity is because I think coming from a brown country, as Ramisha and the rest mentioned, Jenny mentioned that I come from Pakistan. I did my masters in the UK from University of Surrey, and I think when you are an international person living in another country and you're minority there, you automatically come with your own labels, and there are like different perceptions that people hold about you before you even talk to them, before you even speak to them. They already have an image of you in your mind. So I was continuously like, confused for being Arab. I was continuously, sometimes even like American in Europe, it was very confusing what my race was to a lot of other people. It doesn't, people don't understand how that affects you internally, but you internalize that you start um, not resonating with your own culture anymore. You sort of want to absorb other cultures as well, and you become this mixed, confused version of yourself. Um, so the gun in the heart is because the gun looks very violent, and you expect that it's going to fire at you. But there's a heart coming out of it because that's not what what's actually coming out of it is actually love, and that sort of gives you the perception of like how people are too quick to make judgments about other people by the way that they look before meeting them. And I think the entire poetry or my entire experience in the UK itself was sort of making my own labels, giving myself that chance to make people understand who I am without them defining me from where I come from and from the way that I speak. So I'm now going to go into reading a poem, and I'm going to start with a poem that's really close to my heart. That's called Anna, and the reason that it's called Anna has a story behind it that I'm really excited to share because it's a fun story, and that's because Anna was my Starbucks name when I was in the UK. And the reason that I say that is because it was my way of getting my coffee faster. So when they'd ask me what my name was, and I'd be like Annam, they would take ages in the line behind me. Like the people would be getting like really pissed off. So I started using Anna because it was so simple and it was so English. And I was like, okay, cool, A-double-N-A, that's it, it's done. And I think when I started calling myself Anna instead of, introducing my name, I sort of started becoming her, wanting to become her. And this is something that really came from the heart. So I'm just going to dive right in. It's a spoken word poem, so just bear with me if it gets a little long. I hope you guys enjoy it. Anna. As a child, you colored a circle your mother had drawn on a piece of paper with blue, yellow, orange, and red. Do you remember saying that it was Earth? Anna. You were taught about borders for the first time when your father had to borrow money to transfer to his account to show as funds. So you could claim to be successful just because you were in another country. You marked on a map, rich and poor. You knew where you wanted to be. Anna, you speak the language of those who had conquered your land before you had been born. Today, you can write an essay on the effects of colonization in words that aren't even your own. Anna, you came packaged, labeled, stereotyped like stamps of religion injected onto newborn bums. Will you ever be able to forget how you felt being interrogated by an immigration officer at the airport? Anna, you wonder how you can still sound so different when you have soaked and baptized yourself in the history of your rulers, but you remain an import, brought in to learn more from those certified with knowledge to impart. Anna, you often forget the difference between you and your friends until you have a form to fill with 10 extra questions specifically. Why do you try so hard to blend in when a system has been designed to divide? Anna, you're constantly rejecting the idea of home and place of birth being one. Is it out of hope that some place will call you their own out of sympathy? Anna, your identity feels like a phantom limb. It suddenly appears when you're at a dinner and can swallow down spicy food like a badass without dashing for a glass of water. Doesn't it always feel like a revelation that you still possess what you inherited even after wanting to get rid of it? Anna, you feel privileged when they ask you where you're from. You take pleasure from knowing it's because you're fair. Can you remember how it felt to not feel intimidated by just a look? You were taught that staring is impolite, but apparently it's only a rule for a brown person. Anna, you have started to walk with hunched shoulders. The weight of your nation's reputation lies on you as a responsibility. Have you tried climbing into another skin and imitating them so well that little girls no longer holler solar eclipse when you walk into the day? Anna, you have been a bird in flight for years, not allowed to sit down because your wings are too bright for some. You always wanted to be the center of attention, but now you hate standing out because being different means that you have to carry a shield to protect yourself from the bullies. You thought that school was over, but life is a new battlefield where the bell never rings to call it to quit. Anna, you did not just opt for ease. You chose to stop being resonated to images of terrorists just by the sound of your name. Now it feels like a cactus stuck in your throat when you try to spit it out, knowing it will poke you anyway. When somebody else asks you to spell it out, you spell it out EMBARRASSMENT, embarrassment. Isn't it funny that somebody else's mispronunciation makes you feel small? Anna, nobody will understand the art of camouflage as well as you do. You can't even see yourself in your own reflection anymore. Anna, when your mother and grandmother call, you lower your voice and comfortably speak. Leaving your disguise behind for a moment, you're unafraid of saying something wrong. And maybe home is forgiveness for being allowed to be ourselves. Maybe home is where you're called by your name. Anna, will you miss being called? Annam? I'm just gonna take a minute there. Yeah, I just feel very strongly about this poem. And I think like it just reminds me a lot about my own experiences as well. And it's always good to remember them because it kind of roots you, kind of reminds you of your own purpose, reminds you of your own journey and how you've grown through it. I think, you know, identity itself, like it kind of encompasses like lots of things. And it kind of talks, you know, it's about your gender as well, it's about your race as well, and language, as I mentioned before. And a lot of my identity has also been formed, or I've built it around knowing that I'm a woman. So you'll find lots of poems on gender in my book as well. So being born in Pakistan, you instantly realize that there is a difference between you and your father or your brother. Because of the way that you're treated and because of the things that you're allowed to and not allowed to do. And you kind of learn that very early on, you know, when you're not allowed to play outside and your brothers are, when you're not allowed to walk outside and some guy, you know, is your guy friends are, when you're not allowed to be out late. There are lots of like different things that, you know, you experience depending on where you come from, where you live, what area you come from as well, your social status. And I realized that, you know, growing up, my entire journey, I would always be apologizing a lot for my behaviors or anything that would cause any kind of discontent. And like my own presence was itself an apology that I was there. So sorry kind of became like a thing I would just be throwing around all the time. Sorry for loving someone, sorry for not loving someone. Like I had a lot of responsibility on me or on my shoulders to just justify every single action. And I think that really kind of becomes a part of you when you're told that everything is your mistake, or if anything doesn't go right, you have to explain or own up to it. And that's a lot of pressure for, you know, someone young who's trying to find her place in the world. And not understanding what she's even apologizing for. So this next poem that I'm going to read is called An Apology. And I wrote this when I realized that I was always saying sorry too much and trying to understand where that comes from. When I was born, my mother whispered sorry into my ear instead of a prayer. Sorry stuck to my tongue like a catchphrase that I could give frap and present. As a truce for mistakes I was never sure I made. Like my sorry was charity for the underprivileged, and I was rich with apologies. I distributed sorry like candy on Halloween. Whether you asked for it or not, the lights at my home were always on for you. To come see me, down on my knees, ready to please you. I'm sorry, I said. When he told me he had fallen out of love with me, I did not know where to carve another hole. Since I'd already given him my heart, I pushed my hand down my throat, trying to find another organ that he could find space in. When he made excuses of the winter being too harsh, wanting to leave, I said I'm sorry. That God did not always listen to me, but the cave that he had carved in me was for him to hibernate. He had to go. So I said I'm sorry. Knowing that my body was never warm enough, I started to rub my skin against wood, hoping it could catch fire so he could find me habitable. I'm sorry, I said. Every time he yelled, his voice ringing like church bells, loud enough to wake the dead from the graves, I wanted to hush him down. As I lay broken on the ground like confetti at a party, I did not want to be a host of. My sorries were like lullabies. If I could sing them for long enough, maybe I could put his anger to sleep. When none of it worked, I still said sorry for trying so hard, for having too many feelings. He'd call me over emotional, like being sensitive was a disease. But some habits are hard to get rid of, like bloodstains on bed sheets. My aunt told me when her husband lay her on the bed at the age of 16 and she consciously covered her breast, she murmured sorry for being herself. My friend tells me that the day of judgment is definitely near. She has already lived hell on earth in the house of her in laws, where she dresses up the dining table with food and throws sorry as bait to help her cooking taste good enough, hot enough, spicy enough, as she swallows her pride for being the bride of a man that she's chosen to love. Sorry has been sown in my flesh and bones, sealing lips that can't express anything other than the need for mercy. For I can't walk into a room anymore without greeting the audience with sorry if my presence gets the attention it deserves. I grew up this way, wishing for hands like an octopus so I could keep giving and never receiving. But I did not understand. My mother did not whisper sorry to prepare me for the worst, but as a plea of forgiveness for bringing me into a world that was going to teach me how to speak and then take away my voice. Thank you. One of the really interesting parts of my entire writing experience, especially my MA in creative writing, was this course that I joined, and it was called Beat Writing. And currently, I'm doing a workshop on creative writing with my students, and I'm trying to teach them that entire formula as well. And the entire thing about beat writing is that you just pin down like your thoughts without thinking about what you're writing, without editing, without like any concern of how controversial or taboo it is. And there isn't really a rhyme structure. It was all about rebelling against literary forms. So we experimented a lot in that class, and I thought that when I would put my pen down to write, I would realize a lot of things about myself that I wouldn't even know, and I would look back at them and go like, "Oh my God, that was really dark. Like, what's wrong with you?" And I hadn't realized that ever that like I was actually feeling this thing, or I was actually thinking about it. So I wrote a poem about religion, and it was when my parents were going for pilgrimage for Hajj in Saudi Arabia, and I wasn't able to join them because I was in the UK at that time, and I didn't know that I was a little bitter about it, and it was a very it was quite taboo, the entire poem, so I could never put it into my book. But there are a few less taboo ones in the book that people wouldn't judge me so much by, or like create an entire like little image of me. So this is a poem that's I wrote during my beat writing class, and it's called I Am. And I think a lot of it might be something that I feel I am or think about, and maybe like you guys can resonate to it as well. So I'm just going to read this out. I am a pedestrian in a busy city street. where the rich in their long coats stride past without a second look. I am the fly buzzing around an ear, hoping that even if it's by annoyance, maybe the hand swatting me away will touch me. I am homeless in a place where houses are sold. Like the realtors can envision the number of laughs that roar out of the windows, soaring up to the sky like fireflies. I am a stranger, stuck between peering eyes at airports and subways during rush hour, busy days. A moment freezes, sight in slow motion, like men have drank love potions. I am a spare minute given to observe the untied laces on shoes and the dirt on the fringes at the bottom of my jeans. Judgment solidified like I've fallen into quicksand. I am the artist that sits in the corner, wondering about the possibilities of the end of the world, because nobody has proven that breathing will increase the chances of living. I can draw your existence on a canvas to last an eternity, while you question the purpose of the determination I put behind a paintbrush that doesn't pay a penny. I am the funds you put in to feed the lies of the politicians who promise to build you your future, because even the blind can dream in color. I am the student at the coffee shop, soaking up wisdom like a sponge to vomit onto an exam paper the next day that will define which corporation I will sell my soul to. Some days you'll find me advertising healthcare, and other days, God, did you know I have the power to make you believe that the one with all the power resides where I say he belongs? I am the small thing that weighs the heaviest, carried in your palm, holding the world at your fingertips, beating with beep, tweet, Instagram regrams that beat faster than your heart. I carry stories of people I've never seen, and the friend that lies his head on your shoulder needs to book an appointment for you to hear his worries. I am the uninterested, safe, and brave just on your face, a generation that has lost the will to look you in the eye and admit that I am lost. I am the tourist who pays millions to help me explore myself. I've never been here before. I am addicted to sex on screen and books and billboards that teach me violence I cannot use to make love. I am spinning like a washing machine, cleaning myself of the past so you can like me. I am the running label of a brighter tomorrow with a price tag hung around my neck, pleading for you to buy my presence in exchange for attention. I am bereft of friendships and hungry in a world that throws away their food after taking a photograph of what their plate looks like. I am here today, and I'll be gone before you know it with the regrets that I lived, leaving nothing behind, a land to be remembered by, but just remembered while alive. I'm just going to move to my last poem. And this one's about related. I was confused if I wanted to do one that was completely about my body and one that's called an ode to my retainer. And I think I put this one as the last poem in my book. I wrote it the last one as well. And I think that has a lot to do with your body is obviously the first thing that people see, and that's kind of your physical identity. And I struggled a lot with my physical identity. I've thought about the kind of space that I take in a room. I've thought about how I feel when I'm in with a partner. I think about how I look when I enter a room, especially if I'm going out. And when you imagine an outfit in your head and it turns out to look really bad on you and affects your self-image. And the past few years, I've gained weight, and that's been a very I think that's very conscious in my head, and how especially living in Pakistan, you see that difference where in the UK, it wouldn't matter too much. From my own personal experiences, I was more than how what I looked like. While in Pakistan, I was continuously body shamed. So a lot of my poems also come from the basically the meaning of your body, and what is it like? Is it skin? Is it just a flesh? Is it just like a mask that you're just covering your soul with? So this poem is called "Ode to My Retainer," and I think this is also a poem that really relates to identity. So this is going to be the last one before we go into Q&A. Only before bedtime, I accept my imperfections. When the makeup peels off and my pores are exposed, I am from head to toe myself. I pick you up from the bathroom shelf and place you between my jaws. And deep in my mouth, you know of all the lies I have told, like, I definitely do not wear you anymore. Like, I'm confident about the way I look. A taste of awkward teenage years, and still miserably trying to look like something one can accept. Except the only gap that increases is not the middle of my thighs, but the middle of my teeth. I drape myself in a loose tee and dream about a time I can breathe in a pair of skinny jeans, the skin between my legs not chafe from walking too far. And when I can laugh without tracing my tongue over the hole that smiles back at you, displaying my incompleteness. Only before bedtime, I confess I am struggling to be a whole. I'm still looking for parts of me to grow.
Thank you so much, Annum, for sharing your poetry with us. And the way you read them, it really resonates in your book. I remember reading this book for the first time. I was abroad, I was in a new country. There, I was new to reading like contemporary Pakistani poetry and what was going on in the Pakistani poetry scene like last year and the year before. And it's just so nice to hear you read them after reading the book. And in your poems, there is this strong sense of identity. There's female identity, there's Pakistani identity, there's the identity of a traveler and a foreigner. Then there's a struggle between an inner identity and external identity. So this theme in your book about identity and shaping yourself and how you allow the world to shape you, how has that transcended in your book, and how can you comment on that?
So I think like when I write, like a lot of people say that you should write about what you know, and this is a very honest version of me put onto paper. And poetry is obviously exaggerated. Fiction is exaggerated as well, and poetry is sort of like it kind of mix the line between fiction and nonfiction. So lots of things I write do not directly mean a lot of other things, but they don't exactly mean what they're saying. But I think a little bit of me has been put into every single poem. So this was an entire collection of poems that were written over a period of years, and about three, which were very prominent years in my 20s. So I traveled a lot during this time. I did my bachelor's from Malaysia and did my master's from the UK. So, and in the middle, I came back to Pakistan. So there was a lot of moving around and a lot of displacement as well. There was a lot of finding home in different places and not understanding what home was. There was like this confusion of like feeling comfortable with family and loving them, but also wanting to have that distance to be independent. So I think those entire experiences of me meeting other people from different cultures and just being more comfortable, learning to be comfortable in my own skin, but still not being confident enough and still being afraid. I think it all kind of builds into your own experiences and then translating them onto paper without making it too specific to yourself. So I think I tried to through my poems to get into aspects or get into topics that might not necessarily been experienced by me completely, but I've had a small part, or have felt a part of it, so that I could still reflect on it in some ways, and it could become a book that anybody could read. So even though like my massive audience is female, I didn't want to like it's not a very like it is obviously a feminist book. I'm not gonna lie. It is feminist, but it doesn't disregard the other gender in any way or any other gender. in that matter. So it's sort of like I wanted to create it into a collection that could be, picked up by anyone, and they could still find a part of like the poems that they could resonate with.
Amazing. Yeah, it really comes through. And at the beginning, you reflected on your primary sources of inspiration for this book. But how would you then say that, what's happening on the Pakistani poetry scene right now? How would you say your book comments on that? How does your book fit into what's going on right now?
So honestly, I have seen a lot of poetry books come after mine. I think mine was still one of the newer ones, and now the publishing scene has grown. There are lots of new publishing houses as well coming up. I kind of distinguish my book as a book that is not one that is rupee core sword. So a lot of people would like, instantly when they think of a Pakistani or a brown poet publishing a poetry book, they think of Ruby Kaur. And the thing that comes with her writing is that they're very, very short poems. And I obviously you guys noticed that mine are very long. So that's kind of how I distinguish my writing and how I place that in the market, in the Pakistani market, by saying that I'm a spoken word poet, and my poems come in a variety of lengths. They complement with illustrations as well, and they comment on a lot of different aspects of your life, which is why I think it's called Sense Me. That I repeat, like I basically mentioned in the beginning, that's about what you see, what you hear, sort of like everything around you, and then your internal feelings as well. So it sort of like brings it all together. Um, I hope that answers your question. Tell me if I went another way.
No, it does. It does, and it kind of
great.
My next one too, because voice is really important. I remember in the past you speak about finding your voice, and also when you were talking about Anna, you spoke about all these feelings and your experiences growing up as a girl and a woman in Pakistan, and how is finding your voice and speaking through poetry important to this collection? Like, how is your past, defining your voice, and how is that, reflective in this?
So I think you have one distinguished voice, but then it keeps growing and it keeps getting altered through your life. So if I just look at my writing journey, like I would know that I used to write very aggressively in the beginning. I would focus too much on like what other people would think, and if I wanted to put this out there, I've become a lot more freer in that way. And I think like when you find an art form that kind of relates to you, it's kind of like, how I was talking about you finding home in every country, you find home in that place. And that sort of thing that you just hold on to. I found that comfort in poetry, and I felt like, I could really literally like put anything and everything into words and say it. And lots of things that I could never really say to other people could be put in a poem form and would still not directly linked to them, and it could pass by without meaning that it was literally about them or literally about me. So I think when you are a poet or a writer, it's easy to get away because you never really know if this is true or if this is fiction or non-fiction, and how much of it is actually something that a person is. And your voice kind of comes from that. I mean, um, I think if I wouldn't do poetry, I wouldn't be able to create the connections that I was able to in the UK. And when I was performing in different places, I would always be recognized as a Pakistani spoken word poet. And I think from there on, like when this identity was formed, that I could hold on to this title, it gave me the liberty to move around and say that, yeah, this is my style of writing. This is the kind of poems I do. I do longer poems, and I kind of write very raw stuff, and I just experiment and take it on stage and see how people are going to react to that. And now it's become sort of a thing where, like, after years of writing and writing on platforms that are familiar to me as well, so like writing on Instagram as well, and over the years, like university writing as well, and you would do workshops with colleagues, like your other students, and they would be able to pick up on your voice. And I think that's the best compliment someone can give you, is that, oh my God, I read this and I knew it was written by you. because you're able to relate to that writer and know that, oh yeah, this sounds like, this writer has written it. I think the way that you could say that I found my voice is when someone gives you that compliment. So yeah, I think it's sort of also given me the confidence to go like, yes, this is my benchmark, and I can only grow from here.
And I think that's so important to share with new writers, young writers, female writers who like are trying to find liberation and freedom in poetry. Like that young girl that you speak about that, was always apologizing and justifying her every action. When you write your poetry, it feels like you've stopped doing that because you've found a form where you don't have to be apologetic for expressing how you feel. And your whole thing about beat writing as well, like it really comes through, this whole rebellion against, traditional literary form and what traditional poetry should be. Like you write what you want. And I think that's really cool about your work. So what advice would you give to, your readers who are following in your footsteps and reading and writing this kind of poetry? How can they find liberation from things that are, making them feel like discontent, I guess?
So I think when I mentioned that, like poetry kind of is like that home, so it's kind of becomes your safe space. I think that's how you're supposed to view it, that this is like a little bubble, and when I'm writing, I'm just going to get myself in it, and I'm just going to close the outside world so that my writing is not affected by external factors, So when I'm writing, I'm not thinking about what anyone else is going to feel when they read this. It's sort of a little brutal when I'm saying this, but writing is personal and it's about you and it's about your art. So you don't have to think about, oh, someone reads this, how they're going to feel, or like, if I say this, is anybody going to, react to it? Is that you're the one who decides who you're going to show that to in the end, right? Like I was talking about how in beat writing, I wrote a very taboo poem on religion, and I didn't show it to anyone. It was only my last workshop session that I actually read it out to my students, and I said, "This is the first time I'm actually reading it out to anyone." So it really think of it as like when you think of a pen, you just think of that is your weapon of creativity, and you have the power of where it moves and what story it's going to tell, and it's just going to direct everything that you want to write is what you want to write, and that's going to direct your entire purpose, your entire journey, and also just kind of understand that there is a line between writing and publishing. So I think a lot of people focus so much on the fact that they want to publish, that they forget that they have to be good at the writing part first. So don't I think that's one of the best advices, is that just get so good at what you do first that eventually the publishing part will follow. So don't run after that. Get your work edited, get it read by other people, learn from other people, take criticism, and then eventually, you can lead to the publishing part. That's eventually going to come.
Wow, I think that's beautiful advice. Thank you very much, Annum. So I think for the next 10 or so minutes, Jenny's going to join us and take some questions from the audience, and then see if you can answer any of those. I'm sure that would be appreciated. So I'll hand over now to Jenny. Hi.
Thank you very much, both of you. And thank you so much for the conversation as well. So Annum, thank you so much for reading your poetry, but also for sharing your kind of personal sense of being a writer. And it was wonderful to hear the two of you talking about the contemporary Pakistani poetry scene as well. So thank you again.
Thank you.
I'll start with a question from Farzine. She asks about feminism. She says, you talk about being a feminist. How is it, according to being an Asian, Black and Asian minority ethnic feminist in the UK and in Pakistan? What kind of comparisons might you make between your experiences in both places, especially when writing from a feminist point of view?
It's sort of holding a signboard and saying, "Attack me." That's what it feels like to be a feminist in Pakistan. It's giving a reason for people to opening up an entire platform and saying that, oh, throw religious verses at me and tell me I'm the worst kind of person you've met. So it is a very, very different experience being a feminist in the UK and being a feminist in Pakistan. Being feminist in the UK sort of feels like there's nothing standing out about you. Like, it's not like, oh my God, this is like, oh, you're a feminist. Like, that's not how people are going to, recognize you. It sort of just comes with you being a person. It's not something that, I had to fight for or mention in conversations. In Pakistan, it's sort of something that I have to establish. I have to explain a lot, explain why it's necessary, explain why I'm at marches. There's a huge march that happens here in the month of March itself, related to Women's Day, which happens on the 8th. So there is an entire march that is organized by women only, and it's called Aurat March, and Aurat means woman. And that entire march is a very the month of March itself is a very emotional month, because it sort of feels like you're out there in a battlefield holding weapons, because every single person is going to attack you, and they're going to find every little reason to make a comment on things that just go beyond, the kind of very disgusting things as well that you get to hear. And I think, especially as a writer or as someone who has a presence on social media, you sort of have to be brave, and sort of like, build yourself up and go like, okay, you know what, this comment is not going to affect me. Yeah, don't engage in debates, because you sink into that. It's very easy to fall into it and start defending every little action. And it's difficult to grow out of that and realize that, okay, this person said that, and I'm not going to take that personally, and this is more about them than it is about who I am. So I hope that answers your question about how difficult it is. And I think that's the reason why you find so many gender-oriented, poetry in my book, and why that is such a big topic, because of how it influences me day on day.
Thank you. There were lots of comments on your poetry reading. Most of the comments were on Anna. That seems to be the one that most people really engaged with. And one of the comments was on the way that the poem seems to be both raw and prickly and warming at the same time. I wondered if you could comment on that, or whether that's something that you recognise yourself about your style, whether you could talk any more about that poem.
So I think Anna just has like a lot of raw, like it definitely is raw, because I think I wrote it in one go only. And I remember that it started from one phrase about the earth, and about how I was never taught that it comes in so many colors. And, I just thought it was a circle. And so, I think like the poetry, it sort of makes me like, it kind of distinguishes between like what my experience was in the UK as a brown person, and how that affected my identity. And then it moves into wanting to become that person as well. The people were saying that you look like, or like you sound like, or this is how you should be. Also wanting to absorb that and become that person, so it's easy. It becomes easy to just live in that country. And then also being homesick. And I think that's where the sweetness of it comes from, is because every time it did not matter in the end. Like, I still had to go back to my roots, and recognize that there was nothing wrong with that, and that was where a lot of love was. That is where I grew from. So I think the poem is all in its own is like, on a whole, is sort of like a journey of a person, of like starting from point A to reaching point B, and how to grow into that. So yeah, I think I have recognized that, it brings a lot of feelings with it. And I think because it's a spoken word poem, there's also a difference in tone and expression, and that really helps me to basically distinguish between the kind of moods that I'm trying to move between, the kind of phases that I want to move between. So it sort of is like a story, and that is what I try to do with my longer poems. So it doesn't lose attention, and it sounds good to hear. Yeah.
Thank you. Another comment on that was on the idea of renaming, and the question, I wondered whether you could contextualize this within other kind of post-colonial renamings of cities, taking down of statues, that kind of thing. So what effect did it have on you to rename yourself in that way? And do you think it has a resonance in today's context of taking down statues and renaming cities in order to reflect on the impact of colonialism?
Definitely. I think, I come from a country that was colonized, and I have grown up, like, visiting streets and roads that are still named between, named on British people and rulers at that time. There's a lot of roads that are actually called Buns Road or Burns Road, basically, and they're called Empress Market because named after the Empress. And so, like, you grow up like looking at these things and you kind of distinguish them between like how other countries don't do that perhaps, or like, when you talk about taking statues off, I think here in Pakistan we kind of held on to that culture. It sort of became a pride that we were colonized, even though we basically fought a war and gained our independence. We didn't really get independent because that entire power and that influence remained in the city and remained on roads and locations and structures that were built during that time. And you can see that difference between even the architecture that was there before and the kind of architecture that there is now. And that's come from um, a different time when the empire was completely different. So obviously, I think changing your name and name itself is like a very big part of your identity. And when you start calling yourself something else, you sort of come with that personality as well. Like for me, Anna was a lot more easygoing and less nervous and a more confident version of myself who wouldn't think about too much about like what her accent was like and whether she should try faking an accent or she should just be confused as like, what is your accent? So like I think it definitely affects you a lot, and you see that happening around you a lot as well. Even in Malaysia, like I think it was very prominent in Asian culture, maybe to be so influenced by white culture that you want to be a part of it. So even when I was in Malaysia, like I had a lot of Chinese friends, and they would all have English names because it would be easy to pronounce. So I once actually heard this poem by this Pakistani spoken word poet who's called Amir Safi, and uh, he says that I also learned how to say Jennifer or Tommy or Ben or Christopher and not Christopher. So when I can learn that, you can learn my name as well, and that's what my name is. It's Amir Safi, and I think that really resonated with me as a poet coming from brown culture. That what, eventually people are going to know me by my name if I do my work right, if I represent myself properly. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think your response there is a really nice place for us to close, thinking about memorialization, renaming, and the response that your poetry and other poets like you make to the history of colonialism. So I just want to say thank you so much again to both Annum Salman and Ramisha Rafique for a fascinating conversation and a wonderful opportunity to hear your poetry. So thank you so much, and thanks to everybody else for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you to everybody who joined. Josh, thank you for being amazing with all the technical side of everything.
Thank you, Josh.
And yeah, thank you, Annum, for joining us tonight and reading your poetry and making tonight that extra bit special. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.